Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're just giving the rest of the participants a few minutes to join. As soon as that happens, we will begin. Is the sound not clear? Perfect. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is May Ramadan, Stakeholder Engagement Director at AUC Education and External Relations. I hope you're all keeping well and staying safe during these challenging times. It's an honor to welcome you to our webinar today, which is amongst our Business Reconfigured series of webinars that we are launching in the upcoming period. Today's webinar session will be on authentic marketing in times of crisis COVID-19, featured by Dr. Mohamed Kesseba. Next week, we will have more on Wednesday, the 22nd. Our upcoming webinar is going to be adapting to remote working, embracing agile learning. It's going to be from 12 to 1. You can see on the screen now the rest of our series that we will be launching, inshallah, starting next week. Allow me to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Mohamed Kesseba. Dr. Kesseba is a marketing and digital transformation expert and consultant with 23 years of regional and international experience. He is also the Director of Programs at Executive Education in AUC at the School of Business. Before we begin our webinar session today, I would like to first share some engagement tips that would help enhance this webinar experience. Please keep your microphones muted so we don't experience any noise distortions. Please do not open your camera. If you have it on, please kindly turn it off or start, and please don't start the video during the session so we maintain a smooth streamlining connection. We have ample time at the end of the session to answer your questions, so please park all your questions till after the session so that they are structured comprehensively and in relation to the entire discussion. During the questions session, if you have any questions, please either write it in the chat box or raise a hand from the toolbar below. If you would like your question to be privately asked, please send it in the chat box addressing Shireen Al-Alyoubi, who is our co-host today. We want to stick to our hour designated to this webinar and wrap up at 5 p.m. inshallah today. Thank you all. We hope you enjoy today's webinar. Dr. Kesseba, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, May. Hi, everyone. Let me start by thanking everyone for coming today. And as May said, we hope that you all are doing well, you and your families and loved ones in such testing times. The whole idea of these business reconfigured webinars is to get our head around how to navigate the coming period of I don't want to say crisis, but of downturn. It is an interesting period, and there's a lot of discussions about how do we get our head around what to do in different aspects of different areas of business. Today's discussion will be focused on marketing, and as the title indicates, we call it authentic marketing in time of crisis. Now, I would love to start by a very interesting quote, more than 100 years old quote that couldn't be true to a period more than the one we are currently in. The quote goes like that. It says, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And it's very interesting what we're seeing now, because COVID-19 has introduced a lot of societal changes that we're witnessing and personally experiencing during the current period. During lockdown, our habits is seeing a lot of change. The way we communicate, the way we socialize, the way we work, the way we spend, and even our sanitary habits are seeing change. And definitely the way we eat is also changing. I'm 100% sure that some of us, including myself, has gained a couple of kgs here or there. Now, the main question that is being raised now, or the main concept that everybody's trying to discuss, is which of those habits will we as consumers retain after COVID-19 or after the lockdown? Which of those habits will we retain, and for how long will we retain them? And I'm sure you've been bombarded lately with a lot of articles, discussions, and speakers attempting in one way or the other to anticipate the exact change in consumer behavior. And others also trying to exact the expected size of such change. And such mission, in my humble opinion, is mission difficult, if not mission impossible, especially when it comes to consumer behavior. We as consumers are not very good planners, and we're not too good in explaining our own behavior. And history has shown that a lot of times. When you talk to people working in the marketing research field, you will see that this is one of their main concerns. It's not easy to get or to gauge what people plan to do, because more so than less, what consumers say they do and what they actually do are not usually the same thing. So yes, we admit there is change, but change is not going to be the thread of discussion that I want to grab on today. Bill Bernbach, a leading advertiser, a leading figure in advertising, had a very interesting view on things when change is introduced. Bill Bernbach is one of the co-founders of DDB, one of the leading advertising agencies, and he was always talking about how it took millions of years for our human instincts to get formed, and it will take millions of years for it to vary and change. And in his code, he's always talking about how fashionable it is to talk about what he called the changing man, and how marketers must actually be concerned with the unchanging man. It is not easy to build forecasts around change because it's uncertain. And I'm sure that most of you would agree with me that in the current period, we are in uncharted waters. We don't know exactly what will happen next. And in our trials to do so, strategies get tested. So the first statement that I would like to put together is let's try to stop, or let's stop trying to predict the unpredictable. We agree, we admit that there is a lot of impact of the coronavirus right now, and that it is massive, but the reactive phase will eventually end. The reactive phase that we are currently in will eventually end, and things will go back to normal for some, and will go back to a new normal for others. So the thread of today's discussion, what can we learn from previous periods and similar situations? And here I want to talk about three themes that will cover our discussion. It will be the focus of our discussion today. And these three themes should be the focus of marketeers in general. The first fact that we need to realize is this is the constant that I doubt anybody would disagree on, which is we are heading, or we're actually starting to see, a recession. And we have seen a lot of recessions before, and there are a lot to learn from previous recessions. There's a lot to learn from the past. So that's the first theme that we will cover in today's discussions, and the multiple aspects of marketing that we will discuss. and how do we learn as marketeers and as consumers from such periods. The second thing is how to be agile. Being agile is not an option anymore. It was previously an option. Today, it's what you can call a prerequisite for success and survival. Surprisingly, being agile means sticking to basics. The whole idea of agility is to be quick in adapting to frequent change. And there's a lot of change coming. This is something that we admit, and this is something that we all agree on. There will be change, regardless of its size, regardless of how it will affect the business, regardless of many things, there will be change coming. So the whole idea is, how do I become agile in reacting to such change? And such change can be external, could be the environment that I'm operating in, could be external factors, or it could be internal. It could be my resources and capabilities being affected by the way or by the circumstances relevant to the COVID-19 period. Now, sticking to basics, we'll go back to the lovely process, to the lovely marketing process where we need to, the STP process, STP, look at our segments, decide who are we targeting, is there any change due to the new reality, and we need to look at our positioning and be smart about it, and let these three components guide our tactics. How fast you are in going through such process entails how agile we are. So the second theme of the discussion is we need to be agile. The third theme, which is really critical, is being authentic. Now, the core idea or the core concept of marketing is me offering my core customers more value than anyone else. Being authentic means that we need to be true to that. And we need to be honest about it with ourselves. The whole idea is that we need to allocate the big chunk or the big part of our time to understanding value, to understand what is value to our customers. And the rest of our time should be spent on creating and delivering such value. The problem is, most of the time we tell ourselves that this is exactly what we're doing. I'm studying what is important for the customer, but we need to be honest about it. Is it really what all our business operations and strategies and directions geared towards? Is it exactly what we are doing day in, day out? And the other thing about authenticity is, customers are getting tired of being dealt with as numbers or figures. We need to start looking at customers as people. We need to start looking at customers as citizens. And now is the best time to show that. Now is the best time to relate to what they're going through. And the idea of, and that's the theme of the discussion, the idea is between these three focus areas, this would help us not only rally the organization around marketing, or not only help us navigate through the crisis, but it would help us in the recovery period as well. So we're going to go into these three themes as we discuss the two aspects of marketing that we are here to share, which is the strategic side of marketing and the tactical side of marketing. So the first point before I start the coming period is, since we agree that there will be a recession coming, we need to understand the psychology of recession. And there are a lot of studies saying the same thing about the psychology of recession. We're going to take some notes and some lessons from that. The first thing is, you need to look at the way you're looking at the market, the way you're segmenting the market. And as we always discuss, segmentation will always be the starting point for any relevant, effective marketing. In response to the current period, people change the way they behave, and the way they respond to things are different. So out of those studies, there are four groups of people that me and you belong to, and this is across. And when I mean across, this is subject to any industry, to any type of customer, whether B2B or B2C. We all fall under one of these four groups. The first group is what we call the slam on the brakes group, or the slam on the brakes segment. And those are the people or customers who are mostly affected. Those are the ones that are hit financially the most. Of course, they are predominantly lower income brackets, but again, there are some higher income brackets included in it. The ones that were affected from a health perspective, or the ones who were hit from an income perspective, that their response becomes us slamming on the brakes. I will stop all types of spending. I will postpone it. I will decrease it. I will become creative in many ways not to spend money. So that's the first psychological profile, if you want, or psychological segment. The next one is called the pained but patient. And this segment is more optimistic about the longer term, but not so much about the shorter term. They are hit, but they have a better view of what the future is holding for them. So they will, as the same reaction as the slam on the brake segment, they will economize, but in a less aggressive way compared to the previous segment. Now, between these two, between slam on the brakes and pained but patient groups, this is the larger or the biggest chunk of the market. These two groups constitute the bigger part of the market. Other than these two, there are the comfortably well off. Those are practically the segments, or the segment who feel financially secure. Those are the ones in the top 5 to 10% income bracket. And these are not necessarily people with wealth. It could be people who feel confident about the stability of their finances. People who are comfortably retired. People who invested previously, so they have secured income. Or people who are investing, for example, in certificates of deposits, and so on and so forth. So this is the segment who feels more secure about their financial side of things. And their response is very interesting, because those guys, or this segment, they consume at near pre-recession levels. The only thing that they tweak is that they might become a bit more selective. So that's the third group that happens to be there as an emotional response to an economic crisis. Example, the one that we are to experience in the coming period. And the last one is the segment that we call the Live for Today segment. Now those guys are typically younger, whether younger in age or younger at heart. They are the ones who spend on experiences rather than products and services. Those will carry on as usual. Those will extend at max or at best. They will extend their timetable for major purchases. They will just postpone it, but they will continue as usual. Now, the interesting part about looking at the market from these four perspectives, and I doubt you would find a fifth or a sixth group from a psychological standpoint. But the good thing about these groups is that it answers the question that we all have in mind. Are we getting back to normal, or are we not? And the answer is very clear. It depends on which segment am I in, or which segment the customer is in, because people are different. Not everybody will react in the same way. And these four segments gives us a very good view of how we would expect customers to react. And we're going to discuss what to do with it in a short bit. Now, the next point or the next learning from previous recessions is that regardless of the segment or the group that you belong to, there are one of four categories of consumption that each one of us categorize our spend or our consumption of any product or service. The way we look at products and services that we consume is we look at them as either essentials, and these are the things that are necessary for our survival and our well-being. Of course, food, clothing, and transportation and things like that would come under that category. Or there is the other category of treats. We look at products and services as treats. And by treats, we mean that justifiable indulgences that we go into, which again differ by segment. What is a treat for me is not what constitutes a treat for you. And the third category of consumption is the postponables, the things that I really desire and it makes sense for me to buy, but I can reasonably put off for some time. And the last category is the expendables, the things that I can categorize as unnecessary or unjustifiable. Now, all four segments, the previous four segments that we've discussed, or the previous four groups that we've discussed, all of them consider clothing, food, transportation, medical care, and things like that. They consider them as essentials. But beyond essentials, the way you categorize the other three categories, the way you look at them, is different by segment. And from previous lessons again, and from previous recessions, we found out that throughout a downturn, all consumers, except the Live for Today segment, would typically reevaluate their priorities at the time of crisis. So, products and services like restaurant dining, arts and entertainment, travel, electronics, cars, appliances, and so on and so forth, can quickly shift in our customer mind from being an essential to being a postponable or being an expendable, depending on an expendable, depending on which individual segment do we belong to. Now, the trick here is these are very good lessons. This is a very good categorization. Now, what do I do with it? And that's the core thing that we need to get out with from today's discussion. And the way we're going to handle that is that we're going to discuss it from two perspectives, from a strategic perspective and from a tactical perspective. So the strategic part, on the strategic side of things, and these are some notes that really boils down to the core idea of this webinar and all the webinars that we're doing here at the AUC. Notes that would help you navigate your way through the current period. The first note on strategy is, with my understanding, I need to assess the relevant opportunities for my organization. And the way I do that is that I look at my customer base and I understand, I really align which of the four previous segments, the four psychographic groups that we've discussed, which of those four does my core customer belong to? Is my core customer, my main customer, my ideal customer? Are they pain but patient, or are they slam on the brakes? Are they comfortable and well off so that the hit was not as strong? Or are they people who want to live for today? And the second question I need to ask is, how do my core customer look at my products and services? How do they look at the portfolio of my products and services? How do they categorize me? Are my products being seen as essentials, or are they postponables? Or were they essentials that are now pushed to being postponables? And so on and so forth. These two questions are my starting point for an effective marketing strategy. This is where I start to differentiate myself from others. This significant understanding becomes my starting point. So first thing is assess my opportunity and determine which of the 4 segments does my customer, my core customer, my main customer belong to, and how does he, she look at my portfolio of products and services from a consumption categories perspective. The second thing that we need to do on a strategic level, on a marketing strategy level, is smart positioning. And there are two or three moments in this presentation where I will say the word please, and this will be the first one. The first one is please, please do not panic. What happens when we panic and look at things in a tactical way is one of two things. It's either we become frenetic or we freeze. And by frenetic, I mean we run towards repositioning our brand or revisiting my fundamental value proposition. What do I mean for my customer? And this is very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because the moment I start to play with my position in my customer mind or in my core customer mind, I'm alienating a very, very important section of my customers, which is the loyal section, the loyal customer. And this is dangerous because my loyal customer is actually my bloodline in a period of crisis. Also, if I do that, if I play with my repositioning, I might be unintentionally weakening my position for the period of recovery. If I drop in the category that I'm playing in, or if I drop in quality, or if I drop in my messaging, I might not be able to recover when things are getting back to track. And the third thing, if I play with my positioning, is that I might be provoking in one way or another stiff resistance from competitors who are experts in the new space, which is very tricky because now is not the time to provoke such head-to-head competition. So the first thing that I would ask is please do not panic and do not think of positioning this way. You need to be very smart about positioning and you need to plan for the longer term. The other part of panicking, the other thing that we usually do is we immediately stop spending on marketing and media. And that actually has proven to be wrong from hundreds of studies. There was one that is being issued nowadays by, you do yourself well if you go check them and read them. It's called the Brand Recovery Report. And in the Brand Recovery Report, they're looking at the impact, they're reading from previous recessions, and they're comparing brands who did not stop spending on marketing and media during a downturn and how they fared or how they did after recovery. And they found out that on average, they're doing 9 times better than companies who did freeze, who stopped spending on marketing. Now, the P&G CFO has, I think, was announced a couple of weeks back, went out and put a very nice statement that now is not the time for them to get off air. It's not the time not to be salient, not to be clear, not to be evident. De Beers, which is a brand for diamonds, had a very good lesson in 2008 where they actually did the research. They studied, as we said, what is of value to customers, and they understood that customers see diamonds as something of enduring value. And they issued very interesting campaigns around a diamond is forever. Now, this did not mean that their sales increased compared to previous years, but it meant that they maintained their position, and they maintained a healthy desire by customers to continue buying diamonds. So please don't get me wrong, this does not mean that you necessarily can do that, because we all have restrictions when it comes to budgets. But quickly stopping our marketing spend as a first reaction is not always wise. What we need to do is that we need to optimize our spend on the brand. The main component or the main idea here is not to go silent. We need to stabilize the brand and reinforce our core proposition. We need to remind consumers of how our brand is relevant, how it matters for them, and we need to keep investing in research to understand what is value to them. The third part on the strategy side is culture. And there's a famous saying by Peter Drucker, who's seen as the grandfather or the father of modern management, where he said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, when it comes to culture, and I'm going to talk about brands as well. Brands are made up of people, right? And we want to trust the people we do business with. And brands practically are the collective character of their employees. So we need to build our brand from the inside out. We need to build the brand from our culture. You cannot go out there and claim that you will take care of the customer if for any reason, and we're not going to go into this discussion, for any reason or the other, you're not seen as taking care of your employees. So that's a very critical part. It's an enabler. It can make it or break it for you from a strategic perspective. So on the strategic side, to recap, assess your opportunities given your understanding of how your segmentation could be affected. And we always recommend to look at the 4 segments that we shared on a psychographic perspective, categorize how you're seen from a customer perspective, and then be smart with your positioning. Do not panic. Look at the longer term and stabilize your brand, and be very aware of your culture and how your internal brand links to how you're seen. We're going to move from that to some notes on the tactical side of things. And that's the other point or the other juncture where I will stop and say another please. Please do not look at marketing as advertising. Do not look at marketing as merely communication. Marketing has many pillars that help play a significant role. And I'm going to talk here quickly around the famous 4 Ps, which is our hands and legs towards achieving the positioning that we've just discussed. The first one I'm going to talk about is the product. And there is the Harvard professor, Harvard Business School Professor Clayton Christensen shared a very interesting concept, which is called the jobs to be done. And the whole idea behind this concept is that any product or service that we hire as consumers is a product or service that we hire to do a certain job for us. When McDonald's tried to understand or try to increase their sales from milkshakes, they found out that milkshakes, the job that customers hire the milkshakes for is for them to spend, to waste some of their time during the commute to work. That's why they buy it at 8 in the morning, and that's why they buy it alone, and that's why they consume it in the car and not in McDonald's outlet. And when they got this revelation, they understood that they're competing with donuts, but donuts give us sticky hands. They're competing with bananas, which takes 3 to 5 minutes to consume, and they're competing with chocolates and cookies, which fills the car with crumbs. So from that perspective, they realized that the thing that they need to do is that they need to make the milkshake thicker. And the result was the sales increased, and the milkshake took 20 minutes to consume on the way to work. So this is a brilliant concept that we can apply in the coming period. We need to really do our homework in understanding what is the job that my product is hired by the customer to do. If we did not do that already, we need to do it. If we did it before, we need to revisit it, because this job might have changed based on the current circumstances. The other thing that we've already mentioned is looking at our, when it comes to product, looking at our portfolio and revisiting this portfolio. So if I have a number of products and services, I need to look at the changes in the consumption categories that we've discussed. Is my product now seen as an expendable, or is it becoming an essential? And accordingly, I need to revisit my portfolio of services. This is a very important aspect when it comes to the product side. On the pricing side, we need to make it easier to do business with us. We need to improve profitability. Everybody, especially the slam on the brakes and pain but patient customers, are going to be shopping for better deals in the coming period. So I need to make it easy to do business with me. I've seen a lot of big brands introducing discounts and what they called crisis promotions. This is very interesting, and it's a very relevant way to deal with this at the coming period. But a point of caution: you need to approach something like that or such a tactic with extreme care, because what might happen is, if you do it excessively, you would lead customers to revise their expectations about your prices and about your value proposition, about your product, and this will hurt you when things go back to normal. So yes, do discounts, do crisis promotions, but be very careful while doing it. We can introduce things that are like lowering upfront adoption costs. Companies providing services like OSN or telecommunications companies, they can lower the adoption cost, the access fees, the price that I pay to become a customer in the beginning. We can make it easier to do business with us. We can bundle things. We can bundle additional channels if we are a service provider like OSN, or we can actually unbundle some of them and introduce them at lower cost. So there are many ways that we can do this, but the general theme is, from a price perspective, we need to make it easier to do business with us, and we do that by improving our affordability. The next point is something that I'm 100% sure we all are discussing now, and I'm not going to dwell into it. I'm going to skim quickly through it, which is the place, and I'm going to focus on two clear points. We need to be available, and evidently in the current period, we're having an appetite for online engagements or for online that is unprecedented. But mind you, you have to be relevant to your customer, and the mix, your omni-channel mix, the mix between being online and offline, has to be relevant to the customer. Don't go online, don't go digital for the sake of it. Go digital because it's relevant to the customer, and that's the main idea here. And the other one on the place or on the distribution side is be relevant. And there's a supermarket in Egypt called Oscar, and I'm sure our friends and colleagues attending from Europe, you've seen a couple of supermarkets doing the same. They've introduced what we call the senior only hour, where they open the doors for seniors in the first 1 or 2 hours of the day for them to shop safely. And that makes such brands or such companies, it makes them relevant, it makes them authentic, and it makes them relevant to the period that we are in. So that's that when it comes to place or distribution. The last point is in promotion or in communication. And here I'm going to talk about 3-4 very quick points. The first thing that you need to do from a tactical perspective is, first of all, you need to realize in the current period, even the comfortably well-off and the live for today segments are worried. And because they're worried, they would see familiar and trusted brands as a source of safety and comfort. You need to always reassure them. You need to send them reassuring messages, reinforcing the emotional connection that they would have with the brand. You know, messages like, we will get through this together, or we are on your side, or you can rely on us, are very empathetic messages. Of course, the caveat here is that all these messages needs to be backed up by actions. If sales decline, the last thing that you need to do is go and drop your quality or raise prices in an opportunistic manner in a period where revenue maximization is not the core idea. And I reiterate this point: revenue maximization is not the key perspective that we need to focus on now. It's about customer base expansion. It is not about asking people to depart or to part with their money. It's about us getting more reach and influence. So this is the first point, which is empathetic and reassuring messages. The second point is personalize. And I'm taking this example of Dell, which was done after the 2008 recession, where they had messages that if you look at, you will see that they're pretty much relevant to the 4 groups that we've discussed. If they're sending something to the pain but patient, they say, depend on Dell for simple solutions in tough times. If they're talking to the live for today segment, they're saying, weak economy, powerful you. So that's the second thing that we need to do when we're doing our communication. We need to personalize. And the third thing that I cannot stress more is, please double check your messaging. KFC had a campaign in February, and it was around the theme, it's finger licking good, and they had to withdraw it because it's completely irrelevant to the period that we are in. Another example is when McDonald's introduced the social distancing logo in Brazil, and they had a very strong backlash. I'm sharing here one of the tweets where people are telling them, it's not about your cute logo, it's about you playing a role in what's happening in one way or the other. Now, these are very good examples of the point that I want to stress on, which is double check your messaging. So before I close, I want to wrap up our discussion and the key things that we focused on. First thing is, don't always think of change. You can also think of constants, the things that are not going to change. Be agile and be authentic, because these are not optional acts anymore. These are prerequisites for survival and success in the coming period. And learn from the past. There's a lot of lessons that you need to learn from the past. Assess the opportunities on the strategic level. Assess the opportunities and be smart with your positioning. Culture is really important. On the tactical level, look at the jobs that your product or service is doing and be sure that it is clear to the customer, that is relevant to what they're trying to achieve. Improve profitability, make it easy to do business with you. Be available online and offline as relevant to your customer. Show empathy and double check your messaging. And always think that this is not the time for revenue maximization. It's the time for customer expansion. It's the time for reach and influence. And understand that marketing has an important role to play in getting the economy back on its legs. But when we talk marketing in that perspective, we're talking purposeful marketing, not opportunistic marketing. This will end. Make sure and believe and trust that this will end at some point. And inshallah, this point will be very soon. We can make it. Look for the good in it and be prepared. You got this. You got this. Uh, Thank you very much. That's it for me. And we can open now the floor, May, for any questions.
Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you very much.
Celine, sorry.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. The first question is, how can we register for the upcoming webinars? You can log on to Executive Education Facebook page, and there's the link for all our webinars that you can register for. And whether the session will be recorded, it's recorded and it will be shared with you. Now, this question is for you, Mohamed. It's from Ashraf Aibit. The question is it easy to estimate a budget and spend on marketing while we have unclear, vague sales target?
Thank you, Ashraf. So it is not easy, and it will never be easy, whether it's a crisis time or the normal day-to-day business. It's not easy to put a budget together. It's always an interesting exercise. But what I can tell you is that we need to be smart about optimizing our spend. So the point that we were discussing about revisiting our product portfolio, we need to decide which customers are now important for me and which are not, or relevant to me, or which are not, and which products do I need to continue spending on, and which do I need to stop or optimize spending on. This will give me room to achieve a relevant budget, or to play with my budget to stay relevant and not silent.
Okay, we have another question. How can we maximize profit for freelancers nowadays?
Okay. Okay, for that question, we are going to share the entire presentation. This is exactly what you need to do. The exact idea is agility. Freelancing is something that is going to be big, but again, this is just my opinion. We are yet to see what will happen. You just need to be relevant. You just need to understand who are the segments that you're trying to approach. You know, there's a very well put statement that says you cannot be everything to everyone. And I always say it, and if you try to be everything to everyone, you will become nothing to no one. Freelancers need to understand the competitive landscape that they are operating in, because they're not only competing with each other, they're competing with well-established players. So they need to understand the exact customers that they're talking to, and hone their ideas and concepts accordingly. Look at the notes that we've put on strategy, on how do you position yourself, how do you become smart about positioning yourself, and look at the tactical part on how do I improve affordability in such periods, how do I come up with clever business models to make it easy to do business with me, and how do I communicate myself in a way that is relevant to the key jobs that the customers are trying to achieve.
Thank you, Mohamed. Another question is the effect of COVID-19 on the training industry.
COVID-19 will have a similar impact on many of the things. It's confusing, but when it comes to training, I think, and that's a personal opinion, and it might be wrong. In my personal opinion, training is becoming more and more important in the coming period. When we segmented the market, we found out that there's a lot of people who gets training for a post or a stamp of approval. Now is not the time for that. You really need to understand how to do business. So training should become more and more important. And it boils to the same point that I mentioned, which is, let's not panic and stop spending on marketing. It's the same idea with training. Let's not stop spending on training. This doesn't mean, again, that everybody that we're talking to will have money to spend on training, but we need to optimize it. And there will be a lot of solutions. And we at the AUC are going to provide a lot of those solutions for training as well.
Another question from Ahmed Al-Mughazi. He's saying, how can I sustain a smart positioning that will go with me even after this hard time ends and still be agile?
So the whole idea, Ahmed, now it's about trust. The whole thing revolves around trust. We as consumers in the current period are looking at brands and companies to trust. Regardless if you're B2B or B2C, the whole idea is to look at brands that you can do business with. So from your side, bolster trust as much as you can. Be authentic, as we've discussed. Be authentic in what you're doing to the customer. Be authentic in your value proposition. There's a very interesting saying that I heard a couple of weeks back when a writer put the word, if you are selling something of value, it means that you can sell it to your mother, your father, your brother, and your friends. This is practically your asset test when it comes to value. So if you want to sustain your positioning, revolve it around trust in the current period, and this is what's going to take you through. And that's what, by the way, the brand recovery report is saying as well. All those who evolved strong from previous crisis are the ones who bolstered the trust and he revolved their positioning around that.
Okay, we have another question. How do you perceive, or how do you think about the pharmaceutical industry in the coming period? So
that's a bit of a wide question, but to bring it to perspective of the discussion that we're having today, the first recommendation is go ahead and subscribe to the remaining webinars that we're having, because we're tackling such issues from an economic leadership perspective. I recommend that you get on the leadership webinar, because it tells you how to navigate. It talks about how to navigate through such a crisis. But from a marketing standpoint, pharma is one of the, I don't want to call it winners because it's not the right word, but for the lack of a better word, I'm going to call it winners. And I'm sure you've been bombarded with all these infographics on who are the winners for the current period and who are the losers. But pharma is one of the industries that will see growth, but your work should be around the market access part. How do you set your strategy together? Again, back to the points that we've mentioned. How do you understand what is value, but in that case, what is value to the entire stakeholder map that you operate with? What is value for the physicians? What is value for the regulatory bodies in the markets that you plan to go into, or to local regulations or local regulatories? What is of value to the customer themselves? And build your entire strategy there, and see how did the crisis change. How did it change any of the perspectives of how those segments behave, and build your strategy from there.
Okay, we have a question from Ahmed Afifi. How can we use the government subsidies to improve consumer behavior in time of market situation?
Sorry, Shireen, can you come again?
How can we use the government subsidies to improve consumer behavior in terms of market situation? Okay,
now this is a very tricky. It's a very long discussion, but I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. You cannot change consumer behavior. It's a statement. It's a very blanket statement, and it's a very long discussion, but I'm going to say it. You cannot change, or you cannot on your own change consumer behavior. You can make them aware of better things that would help them. People do not change the way they behave only by marketing. There are other things that affect why you behave. Your disposable income, your appetite, your trust in the economy, your trust in the lifestyle, your trust in your future, your own future. Now, what you can do on that perspective is that you can utilize the funds that you have for better communication. Make people comfortable, send, as we said, reassuring messages that we're going to get through this together. Build something of value to them. So if you want a short answer, build value. First, understand value, build value, and deliver this value to them. And while doing it, reassure them that that you're doing that you are in this together.
Okay, Ahmed Mitwalli is asking, how do you see the education industry shifting in these times, and how can we ensure sustainable profitability?
Okay, again, subject to our discussion, the education as an industry, the way it's changing, it's something that we are trying to understand as we go. From a tactical perspective, the online will play a relevant role in the coming period. We need to do like what we're doing now. We need to look at the topics that is of more relevance to the base, to the customer base that we are talking to, whether it's business professionals or undergrads. We need to build their knowledge, and we need to look at education as a valuable journey and build our value around that. So the short answer is understand who are the key segments that we're talking to now, understand what is value to them, understand how do we deliver this value to them, and build our value proposition from there.
Okay, we have a question from Dalia saying, if a company is an importer and local distributor for medical machines not related to COVID, but two products are, how can it best market its products now?
See, Dalia, the whole idea, as we said, is let's stick to basics. Okay, in time of crisis, we always panic and we always think that there are new ways of doing things. The whole idea is that business has very clear and tested concepts and processes. Marketing is one of them. As we said on the agility side, you need to understand the segments that you're talking to. You need to prioritize those that you can serve better than others. You need to position yourself as strong as can be given your capabilities, and all the rest will follow. All the other tactics will follow. That's it, and that's a general comment, by the way. Let's first look at the basics and then see what the new perspectives can help us do. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we have a question from Mustafa. How about industries that need direct marketing, not mass marketing? So the digital way will make a big load on customers as they will get too many emails, phone calls, or any other ways of communication. How to handle it?
Okay, so can you repeat the first part, Shireen?
Yes, sure. He's saying that they have industries that need direct marketing, not mass marketing.
Okay.
The digital way.
Okay. Now, the answer to this question is practically, again, the entire presentation. The whole idea is whether it's mass marketing or direct marketing. Again, my previous process, hopefully this is what I was doing before crisis or before a recession. Hopefully I understood my segments. I understood what are the value requirements, and I built my value proposition around it. And hopefully all my activities follows such positioning. So I'm not sending confused messages. Now, if my work entails more direct marketing, it follows the same rules. It's just that when doing it, I need to be genuine in what I'm doing. I need to be authentic, as we said. I need to send messages that differentiate, or not differentiate, that makes it clear what is the differentiation I'm offering the customer. So direct marketing is merely a tool or a tactic that I need to build on top of the part that we've discussed, on top of my smart positioning, on top of my relevant internal culture, on top of me realizing what are the opportunities that I need to follow, what are the new segments, or what are the changes in my current segments, and how do I reposition, if at all, for them in the longer or the shorter term.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. So Omnia is asking, how can we switch consumer art-related content from treats and postponable to essential for survival or keeping sanity?
See, the idea here is not to change it, Omnia. It's not to change it. It's to understand. Now, I have a portfolio of products, and in the current period, it's all about uncertainty. I'm not clear what's happening. So what I need to understand is, how did they shift when it comes to viewing my products and services? And based on this understanding, I revisit my portfolio. It's usually a lost fight to try to persuade the customer that a treat is an essential, or that an essential is a postponable. It's very difficult to do it on our own, and it requires a lot of funds that we do not possess at the current period. So what we need to do is, rather than try to do it, understand. And I cannot stress more on the word understand value. This is what we need to be. If you categorize your work, I can easily say that you need to spend 60 to 70% of your time trying to understand and further understand your customer value requirements.
Last question from Mohamed Midhat. He's asking, can these steps be applied to B2B market, or are there other steps? And can we customize a strategy?
Yes to all your questions, Mohamed. Definitely we can. This applies to B2B and B2C likely. The only nitty-gritties would be around, how do I become authentic from a relationship perspective when it comes to B2B? How do I build my 4 Ps, my tactics? So again, it's exactly the same. I improve affordability. I make it easier to do business with me. I understand what's the exact job that I want, that the customer or the B2B customer want me to do. And I understand how to communicate to such B2B customers, and how do I become available, okay? Now, helping B2B customers is really critical, and the whole idea boils down to, again, part of your question is, how do I customize my strategy? Again, the starting point is revisiting my customer base. And by the way, the 4 psychological groups or segments that we've mentioned apply to companies. One of your colleagues asked about revisiting my portfolio, and I'm gonna mention the same response, which is, you need to look at your portfolio of services and decide which of them is relevant to the customer at the current period.
Okay, thank you, Mohamed, very much. Actually, we have a lot of questions, but our time is up. So we're going to be trying to address your questions at a later stage. Thank you, Mohamed, very much for your time, for your very informative session. And as we mentioned at the beginning, anybody who's interested to attend any of our webinars, please log on to Executive Education website or Facebook page, and there you can register for our upcoming webinar sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.